Cognitive neuroscience. Cognitive neuroscience is the field of study linking the brain and the other aspects of the nervous system to cognitive processing and, ultimately, to behavior. The organ in our bodies that most directly controls our thoughts, emotions, and motivations is the brain, in which localization of function refers to the specific areas of the brain that control specific skills or behaviors, which helps major goal of present research on the brain, that is to study location. On the other hand, the nervous system is the basis of our ability to perceive, adapt to, and interact with the world around us. Through this system, we receive, process, and then respond to information from the environment. Gross anatomy of the brain. The brain has three major parts. These are forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain, that contain structures that perform essential functions of survival and for high-level thinking and feeling. First is the forebrain. This is the region of the brain that is located toward the top and front of the brain. It contains cerebral cortex, basal ganglia, the limbic system, thalamus, and hypothalamus. The basal ganglia is a collection of neurons for motor function. This function can result to motor deficit like tremors, involuntary movement, and slowness in movement. Example of this is Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease. Limbic system. The limbic system is important to emotion, motivation, memory, and learning. Suppress instinctive responses. It helps us to adapt our behaviors flexibly in response to our changing environment. The limbic system has 5 structures. First is the septum. The septum involved in anger and fear. Second is the amygdala. The amygdala, emotions like anger and aggression. Stimulation of amygdala results to fear through palpitations, hallucination, or frightening flashbacks of memory. Damage or removal of amygdala can result to maladaptive lack of fear. Example, autistic displays limited activation to amygdala, which leads to the social impairment that is typical of persons with autism. For example, difficulties in evaluating people's trustworthiness or recognizing emotions in faces. Another example of this is visual agnosia, or the inability to recognize objects, and hypersexuality. The third structure is the hippocampus. It is an essential role in memory formation, flexible learning, and spatial memory. It is seahorse-like shape. Removal or damage of hippocampus can lead to memory loss. Example of this is Korsakoff syndrome. Other symptoms include apathy, paralysis of muscles controlling the eye, and tremor. Deterioration of hippocampus is caused by lack of thiamine that can lead from excessive alcohol use, dietary deficiencies, and eating disorders. The fourth structure is the thalamus. The thalamus relays incoming sensory information through groups of neurons that project to the appropriate region in the cortex. It is at the center of the brain at about eye level. The thalamus also helps in the control of sleep and waking. Malfunction of thalamus can result to pain, tremor, amnesia, impairment of language, and disruptions in waking and sleeping. The fifth structure is the hypothalamus. It regulates behavior related to species survival, fighting, feeding, fleeing, and mating. It came from the Greek word hypo or under. It is located at the base of the forebrain beneath the thalamus. It belies its importance in controlling many bodily functions. Dysfunction and neural loss within the hypothalamus are noted in cases of narcolepsy. It is when a person falls asleep often and at unpredictable times. The second major part of the brain is the midbrain. It helps to control eye movement and coordination. In midbrain, the network of neurons in regulating consciousness like sleep, arousal, and attention is the reticular activating system or RAS, also called the reticular formation. The brain stem connects the forebrain to the spinal cord. It contains the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The third major part of the brain is the hindbrain. It contains medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum. Medulla oblongata. It controls heart activity and largely controls breathing, swallowing, and digestion. The medulla oblongata is an elongated interior structure located at the point where the spinal cord enters the skull and joins with the brain. It is the place in which nerves from the right side of the body crosses over to the left side of the brain and vice versa. Pons. It serves as a kind of relay station because it contains neural fibers that pass signals from one part of the brain to another. Its function is bridging. Cerebellum, or the little brain. It controls bodily coordination, balance, and muscle tone, as well as some aspects of memory involving procedure-related movements. The cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex plays an extremely important role in human cognition. It forms a 1 to 3 millimeter layer that wraps the surface of the brain somewhat like the bark of a tree wraps around a tree. Its elements are the sulci, in singular sulcus, are small grooves. Fissures are large grooves. Gyri, singular gyrus, are bulges between adjacent sulci or fissures. The corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is a dense of aggregate of neural fibers connecting the two cerebral hemispheres. It allows transmission of information back and forth. Once information has reached one hemisphere, the corpus callosum transfers it to the other hemisphere. The people who have undergone operations severing the corpus callosum are the split brain patients. Split brain research reveals fascinating possibilities regarding the ways we think. Many in the field have argued that language is localized in the left hemisphere. The cerebral hemispheres contains 4 lobes. The first lobe is the frontal lobe, toward the front of the brain. It is associated with motor processing and higher thought processes such as abstract reasoning, problem solving, planning, and judgment. The second one is the parietal lobe. It is at the upper back portion of the brain. It is associated with somatosensory processing. The third one is the temporal lobe. It is directly under your temples. It is associated with auditory processing. And the last one is the occipital lobe. It is associated with visual processing. The occipital lobe contains numerous visual areas, each specialized to analyze specific aspects of a scene, including color, motion, location, and form. Primary somatosensory cortex receives information from the senses about pressure, texture, temperature, and pain, while the visual cortex is primarily in the occipital lobe. Some neural fibers carrying visual information travel ipsilaterally from the left eye to the left cerebral hemisphere and from the right eye to the right cerebral hemisphere. The brain is a very complex structure, and researchers use a variety of expressions to describe which part of the brain they are speaking of. These are the words rostral, ventral, caudal, and dorsal. The rostral refers to the front part of the brain, literally the nasal region. The ventral refers to the bottom surface of the body or the brain, the side of the stomach. Caudal literally means the tail and refers to the back part of the body or the brain. And the last one is the dorsal. It refers to the upside of the brain. It literally means back, and in animals, the back is on the upside of the body.